Hello, I'm Ron Squire. Welcome to highlights of the 2025 Formula SimRacing World Championship. Round 4 of the championship is the Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring near Spielberg. A historical track located deep in the Styrian Mountains, the circuit is known as either the Österreich Ring or the A1 Ring, is one of the shortest on the calendar. Nevertheless, it's a test on elevation and the ability to ride the curves. The Red Bull Ring requires a unique and balanced setup to negotiate 71 laps of the 4.3km course. Taking a pole position for the second race in a row is Ron Squire, his third pole this season. Mark Suter once again has to contend with second, as Sander Kallas puts in another brilliant performance for third. The optimal eSports cars of Janis Braksok, Jeffrey Fournier, Zolk Souks and Istvan Zingel occupy 4th to 7th places on the grid. Patrick Hanko is hoping to put behind his Australian woes with a decent 8th place. George Zalgianis is hoping for the same as he qualifies 9th, and Jase Latin returns after a one-race absence to put his car into the top 10 for the first time this season. It was a mixed session for CMT Go Team Racing, with Cosmo Buscito in 11th, Cedric Bill in 14th and Nando Marza in 15th, sandwiching both Vega Valley eSports cars who had a terrible qualifying session, Mirko Mancini out-qualifying Tom Oldenberger in 12th. To the race start, and Schluter seems to have a better start but couldn't really mount a challenge on Machete with the field packing into turn 1. Kallas has a look on Schluter on the outside whilst Braksok pushes himself forward in front of teammates Fournier and Zooks. Everyone makes it through turn 2 safely, with the only contact coming from Braksok as he nudges Kallas in the back with no real ramifications. One man who's had a lightning start is Patrick Hanko, having started from 8th behind the 4 optimal eSports cars. By the time the field goes halfway through the lap, the Slovakian has passed the optimal quartet and even passes Kallas for 3rd, as the Estonian loses out to Fournier. So at the end of the opening lap, Machete leads from Schluter, Hanko, Fournier, Kallas, Braksok, Souks, Zingel, Latinen and Zalgianis. Kallas continues to go back in the field as he now gets overtaken by the optimal of Janis Braksok. With Kallas the only driver in the top 10 on hard tyres, the Gotland Effect driver is hoping the strategy gamble pays off later on in the race. Lap 3 and the optimal driver Istvan Zingel struggles to keep his car together as he loses the back end after turn 1. Thankfully he avoided the barrier and was able to continue, but only losing 8th to Jase Latinen. Zingel would regain the position on the next lap. On lap 4, Tom Oldenberger is not having a good time near the back of the field, and his misery seems to be compounded when the second MV conquest of Lucas Viscott overtakes the Dutchman at turn 3. Oldenberger attempts to reclaim 14th, but the Czech driver holds his ground and pulls away with the position. Lap 8 and George Zalgianis has a look at 9th, which has been occupied well by the MV conquest of Jase Latinen. However, the Fed would eventually give up his place to Zalgianis before turn 3. The first stops of the race began on lap 19, with Mirko Mancini pitting his Valley eSports car from 12th. The Italian rejoined at the back of the field behind Nando Marza. It will eventually be the next lap for the race leader to pit, as well as Patrick Hanko takes the lead for the first time in the race. Ron Squire rejoins in 7th, just in front of a recovering Tom Oldenberger. Lap 21, and Lucas Viscott's quiet race is about to turn sour. After turn 2, the Czech driver seemed to mount a challenge on the recently pitted Istvan Zingel. Viscott attempted to overtake him on the back straight on the outside, but had no room to go as he goes onto the grass, loses the back end and into the armco before going straight off at turn 3. Lucas Viscott loses his front wing in the process, but was able to continue back to the pits. During lap 23, Buscito has a look at Zalgianis for 11th, and on better tyres, the American makes the pass through turns 3 and 4, pushing ahead of the Greek. Sander Kallas assumes the lead on lap 24 after Patrick Hanko pits. The lead for the Estonian will only last for 6 laps before the ground effect pitted. This meant that Ron Squire retakes the top spot 10 laps after the German first made his stop. As the field goes into halfway distance, so the top 10 are miraculously keeping themselves within 25 seconds of each other. Leader Ron Squire is at least 3.5 seconds ahead of Patrick Hanko. Championship leader Mark Schluter sells himself in 3rd, trying to keep hold of his teammate. Fournier takes over 4th from Braksok. Sander Kallas is having a rough time in 6th, just 4/10 off Zolk Souks. Istvan Zingel has 8th secure for now. Cosmo Buscito is doing his best to keep 3 co-team drivers within the top 10, and Jase Latinen is on course for MV Conquest's first top 10 finish this season, a few seconds ahead of George Zalgianis. Mark Schluter, despite being on hard, is starting to get some serious grip, and with the recently pitted medium starting to wear off, Patrick Hanko is starting to fear for his 2nd place. Eventually, the Slovakian pitted on lap 42, effectively surrendering 2nd to Schluter. This stop meant all the field except for 3 drivers are now on the hards. Those who remained on the mediums at the start of lap 43 were Jase Latinen in 9th, Tom Oldenberger in 11th and Cedric Bill in 13th. But on lap 44, Jase Latin makes his stop, but instead of hards, the Finn instead goes on to softs, to the bafflement of everyone watching and now curious to what the MV Conquest driver has in mind, especially since he's now out of the top 10 as a result of the stop. For the last few laps leading up to lap 47, Sander Callis is becoming increasingly frustrated by what looks like to be an optimal esports train led by Geoffrey Fournier, as the Dutch outfit keeps themselves tight-knit, giving no opportunity for the Estonian to complete a clean pass. The train would eventually break off at the beginning of lap 50 as Fournier comes into the pits from third. Jas Braksok and Zolt Soeks are now left setting ducks, and with no one to feed off any downforce, Sander Callis takes his opportunity to overtake Soeks for fourth, and with Braksok pitting on the next lap, Callis goes back into third, doing his best to hold off a now rampant Soeks. Lap 51 and Shooter dives in from second place to fit in on mediums to try and recover some pace. The German rejoins in fifth just ahead of Fournier. Ruven Machete then makes his stop for mediums on the next lap, losing the lead only briefly to Callis as the optimal driver comes out just behind Patrick Hanko in what is seemingly a disaster for the German. To make matters worse to Machete, he also rejoins a second ahead of Mark Shooter as both Germans finally battle it out at the Red Bull Ring. Lap 55 and Sander Callis makes his final stop to pit on mediums, surrendering the lead once again to Patrick Hanko as the Estonian rejoins in 7th just behind Zolt Soeks. But the lead for Patrick Hanko will only last for a few corners as Ruven Machete, now rampant on fresh medium tyres, hounds Zavakin before making his move at turn 3 around the outside to take the top spot. Hanko refuses to give up the lead quite easily as they both go side by side through turn 4. This time with the German now on the inside, the optimal driver secures the place, with Hanko now losing ground to Machete as Zavakin moves out of the way for Schluter to try and earn as many points as possible in his championship fight. One man who's involved in the championship fight as well is Tom Oldenmenger. Sadly, his day goes from bad to worse as he loses control at turn 6, going off onto the gravel and slightly ledging the Armco. Thankfully, he was able to continue at the cost of 10th place to Zalagianis. As the field goes into the final 10 laps, the order starting to become more and more apparent. Ruven Machete now seems certain to hold on to the top spot all the way to the finish line. Mark Shooter, despite being over 1.5 seconds behind, is unable to catch up. Patrick Hanko is holding up third from Geoffrey Fournier. Jas Braksok in the second race back holds on to fifth from an incoming Sander Callis. Zolt Soeks can catch up to the Estonian but has a big enough gap to coast home in 7th ahead of Cosmo Prosciutto. Jase Latin's bold strategy of putting on softs seems to be working with the Finn comfortable in 9th, whilst George Zalagianis holds on to the top 10 spot just a few seconds ahead of Tom Oldenmenger. Lap 48 and Jase Latin's strategy seems to be fading. At turn 2, George Zalagianis passes the Finn with ease as the MV Conquest struggles in the last 4 laps of the race. One man who seems to be struggling all of a sudden is Mark Schluter, with both Hanko and Fournier now coming up to the championship leader as the medium seems to be all but spent. Hanko now has the DRS advantage off Schluter but will now be used to get to fend off Fournier for third with 2 laps to go. On to the 71st and final lap, and all of a sudden, Sander Callis gets involved in the battle for second, which is now a 4-way battle for the flag. But disaster strikes for the championship leader Mark Shooter as he uncharacteristically runs out of fuel and heartbreakingly surrenders second to Hanko as he slips back down the field. Whilst further back at turn 3 is heartbreak as well for the MV Conquest as Jase Latin succumbs to Tom Oldenmenger's advances, with the Dutchman now taking the last spot in the top 10. Making a 2 out of 4 in 2025, Ruven Machete takes victory in Austria as he reels in Mark Schluter in the championship. Patrick Hanko caps off a great performance to finish second for CMT Go Team, and for the second time in a row, Geoffrey Fournier caps off the podium for his 3rd appearance on the rostrum this season. Sander Callis is Mr. Consistent with his 3rd 4th place finish, just in front of Jas Braksok who finishes 5th. Mark Shooter put in a warrior performance in Austria, but fuel problems meant he slipped back down the field on the last lap. However, he still holds a vital clutch of points and the fastest lap as he takes 6. Zolt Soeks comes back from his crash at Melbourne to take 7th. Cosmo Prosciutto has a good race to claim 8th. George Zalagianis scissors his fortune around from Australia to finish 9th, and Tom Oldenmenger pushes into the top 10 after his horrible qualifying performance. For the first time this season, a race has concluded with no retirements. After 4 rounds, the Drivers' Championship standing sees Mark Shooter still holding on to the top spot, with the gap now reduced to just 13 points from an informed Ruven Machete. Geoffrey Fournier and Sander Callis both overtake Tom Oldenmenger for 3rd and 4th, whilst Patrick Hanko leaps up to 6th ahead of Zolt Soeks by 3 points. George Zalagianis keeps hold of 8th, whilst Jas Braksok breaks into the top 10 with 9th, ahead of Istvan Zingel in 10th. In the constructor standings, Audible Esports now take the lead from CMC Go Team by 22 points after strong performances in the past 2 rounds by the Dutch outfit. Ground Effect still hold firm in third, just 19 points from Vega Valley Esports, and a further 42 from Envy Conquest, while Squire Nation Esports didn't have anyone available for Austria. The next race is next month at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix on Sunday the 14th of September. And you can watch that race live as it happens right here on our YouTube channel. Qualifying begins at 8:30 PM GMT, with the race starting at 8:45 PM GMT. In the meantime, you can join in on our forums at formula-simracing.net, as well as our Discord server for up-to-date information and join in on the community. The links are in the description below, and you can check out our socials on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. We hope you enjoyed today's presentation. I'm Ron Squire, and join us for the next round of the 2025 Formula Sim Racing World Championship.